Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming to our Zoom morning. So just to let everyone know, we're recording this session just so that we can keep it for anyone who hasn't been able to come today. The way it's going to work is I'm going to hand over to Elaine Penhaul, who is the chair of the Magenta Project, and she's going to chair this morning's session. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat, and then we'll keep them for the Q&As. So Elaine is going to do an intro on the Magenta Project, whose aim is to accelerate women to the top of sailing, and then she'll introduce our speakers. So over to you, Elaine.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you very much, guys, for the invitation today to come along and chair this event. I'm delighted to be here with you on behalf of the Magenta Project, and I will keep my chat bit to very short. I've got a couple of slides to show you just a little bit about the Magenta Project, what we do, and how you can get involved. And then very swiftly hand over to Helena Lucas and Lucy Mcgregor, who we're extremely lucky to have here with us this morning, and both of whom have been involved in different ways with the Magenta Project, both of them currently mentors on our mentoring programme at the moment. Helena has been heading up our coaching programme for the last couple of years, although obviously this year that's been curtailed somewhat. So very, very pleased to welcome both Helena and Lucy to the event on behalf of Magenta. And I will just endeavour to share my screen with you for a minute or two before we kick off. So just tell me that I'm sharing the right screen again. Am I sharing the screen without the notes? Is that?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic, thank you. So the Magenta Project is a UK charity with a worldwide reach, set up following the successful SCA involvement in the Volvo Ocean Race in 2014-15. And the women that came off that race decided that they wanted to do something bigger to help more women get into the performance end of sailing in particular, and the Magenta Project was born. It's gone through several iterations since then, gained charitable status at the very end of 2018, and I became the first chair in March 2019, and from there we've gone on to put more structure around the organisation, and now we've got lots of different pathways that I'll just whiz through, and our mission is still to develop pathways and generate opportunities for women in the performance end of sailing. We believe that there are other organisations that do that very well already at grassroots level, and the Magenta Project aims to pick up when women are ready to race and to coach at a higher level and to get involved in creating those opportunities. So the objectives as a worldwide charity are very much around creating equal access and opportunities for women in our sport. And our objectives, our stated charitable objectives, are to do that by upskilling, coaching, and offering networking opportunities, and promoting female sailors to inspire other women, championing change with sports bodies at all levels within sailing, so from the from the RYA right the way through. At the moment we're just getting involved with the new diversity agenda with SailGP, for example. So all the way through we try and have a voice, so that we are constantly developing these pathways. As you can imagine, some are easier than others. And the strategy that we employ, the mentoring program that the Magenta Project we're just coming to the end of the first iteration of that when I took over as chair, and we're now in the third year of that. It's become a worldwide program with, I think, 40 plus pairings, successful pairings of mentors and mentees around the world, of whom Helena and Lucy are two of our mentors. And that helps women who both want to get into performance sailing and also into businesses and coaching, and make a step change from where they're currently sailing into where they'd like to be. So I'll leave Helena and Lucy to talk a little bit more about what they've learned in that. Really important for us to be promoting stories and images on social media and anywhere we can. We've been particularly lucky, as you know, early part of this year, with the stories coming out of the Vendée Globe in particular, to champion those women. Lots of inspiration going on in the sailing world at the moment. Working on the diversity agendas with organisations from the World Sailing Trust, particularly following their review the year before last now, came out at the back end of 2019, I think. Working with them, the RYA, the Ocean Race, SailGP, and other wider organisations, other charities that particularly look around worldwide around getting more women into sailing. Developing race training programmes from club sailing to foiling clinics. We've just welcomed to the Magenta board Luca Rizzotti, who runs Foiling Week in Garda and in another number of other venues. So we're looking forward to developing more clinics. We've developed clinics with Foiling Week in the past, and we're looking forward to developing more clinics. And of course, getting involved there gives us the opportunity to feed more women into things like SailGP, America's Cup, Vendée, into the foiling side of that. So really important to be setting up the clinics so that we've then got a feed of experienced, capable women going into the performance sailing world. And connecting people. We've got amazing networks worldwide. So very briefly, before I hand over, things, ways that you can get involved, and your team have got this set of slides, and hopefully they, feel very happy for you to share those afterwards, Lucy. So if that's where you're heading. So send us stories, tag us in as the Magenta Project. Any of the imagery, share those. We can share your stories as well if we know that they're there. If you haven't tagged us in, we don't know that you're posting positive stories. So tag us in and we can share those for you. Let us know of events that you're involved in running. And we're always very happy to comment on how they're set up and support you in helping to make those better. We've got a fantastic pool of mentees, ex-mentees now, who are very keen to help and support the Magenta Project. So we can usually tie you up with somebody who can either come along or help you in a different way. Make sure that you're inviting other women, less experienced women, to come along to shadow events, everything from sailing to race management. Seeking out male advocacy is really important at this stage, I think. What we really don't want, and those of you that have heard me speak before, I'm very anti the kind of drum banging version of feminism or chest beating version of feminism that my generation grew up with. Things are only going to change if we get the guys on board, both literally and figuratively, in a sailing world. So do seek them out, do just chat about what we're trying to achieve and get them to help drive the change as well. Volunteer with us to help with specific projects. If you're interested in helping, then let me know. We've always got things going on where we can hook you up. And of course, fundraising. We are a charity. We have no funding at the moment, so we're always looking for help with fundraising. And those are the contact details. So that's pretty much which will be shared afterwards. So that's the Magenta Project. I am delighted to now hand over to Helena Lucas, our most successful Paralympian sailor, She will tell you more about what she's done and about her journey as a woman in the sport. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Hi, everybody. So Rebecca, when I asked Rebecca what she wanted me to talk about, she gave me quite a list. So I'm gonna share my screen and start off. Can everyone see that okay? Perfect. Yeah, so I think I'd just start off with my sailing journey and sort of how it all began. So I guess I got into sailing when I was about 8 years old, through my parents, dragged along, hated every minute of it, sat in front of the boat crying my eyes out. But I think it was, we went on holiday to Greece, did one of the sun sail, 1 week dinghy sailing, 1 week flotilla sailing. And I think for me, that was kind of the turning point. I think something to do with the weather probably helped, and the fact that it was nice warm water, and just had an amazing time, and just, you know, thoroughly enjoyed being on the water. I think with other kids sailing different boats, I mean, I think most of the time we were capsizing and swimming and all that sort of stuff, but it was definitely the turning point for me, and came back, and as a family we had a topper, and I kind of inherited it, took it over, and that's kind of where it all began, and started racing, did the nationals, did gosh, what are they, it wasn't zone squads then, I think they called it centre of excellences or something like that. So at an early age kind of got onto the RYA scheme and youth system, and from toppers I moved into 420s, became a member of the youth squad, raced 420s until, actually I raced 420s until I was 21. I didn't make the switch till 470s till after I graduated from uni, which is something I'll go into actually at a later stage in my presentation, explain kind of why I made that decision. But yeah, 420s and then into 470s, and campaigned in the 470 class for 2000, so the Sydney Games, and then 2004 the Athens Games. Never quite made it. I think I was second in the trials both times, so never quite managed to make selection. And it was, I think, after the announcement or in 2004, I was actually approached by the RIA to see if I'd be interested in switching from the 470 and an Olympic class into the 2.4, which was a Paralympic class. And for me, it was actually quite a big decision. And to be really honest, at that time, I wasn't really very aware of the Paralympics. So for me, it's kind of like my whole dream had always been obviously Olympics. So it was at the time quite a difficult decision to make. But Jenny Healy, who was my crew at the time in the 470, she was going back to her job as a physio. I was kind of like, what am I going to do now? I'd done 8 years, probably longer in the 470. Was getting a little bit stale, to be honest, but there was nothing else I could sell at that moment, way too small to sell a laser radial. So it was kind of, I guess, an opportunity. And I remember Jen just saying to me, just, why don't you try it, give it a go and see what you think. You know, if you don't like it, then that's fine, just, you know, walk away. So yeah, I made the switch into the 2.4 meter, and it probably was the best decision I ever made. And I think I quickly realised, you know, the level of competition, certainly in sailing at Paralympic level, and I think, to be honest, in all the sports, all the Paralympic sports, is incredibly high. And I did go into the class with possibly a little bit of arrogance, not helped by the RWA telling me I was going to smash it. And that, I remember the first regatta I did, I think it was Miami, and yeah, I think I finished 5th or something like that, and kind of came away going, either I'm not very good or these guys are really good. And it basically, a lot of them had, you know, amazing sailing histories. Like Damien, he'd campaigned in the Tornado. Heike was a laser sailor. Thierry, he'd been a cat sailor. So they, you know, their sailing skills were right up there. And I think for me, the other difference was I'd kind of gone from just competing against women, obviously 470 in those days, it's changing now, was, you know, just, you know, just, they split the class, male and female. And suddenly now with the 2.4, I was racing against guys, and mainly guys. There's only, well, the London Games, I was the only female competing at the London Games. Rio, there was one other female in the class in Rio. And most of the time it was just myself and Megan Pascoe, also from Great Britain. We were the only two females really racing on the circuit. So it was quite different, and you know, it is a different experience, because guys they still do, they hate getting beaten by girls. So they do, I swear they give you a tougher time for sure. And then I think once they realise that actually no, I wasn't going to be pushed around, then you just get that fantastic respect. And half the time, to be honest, I kind of forgot that a lot of the time, certainly at the London Games, I kind of completely forgot I was, you know, the only female out there competing on the water, because, you know, all genders got put to one side. And you know, I had an amazing career in the 2.4. Won gold in London. Was hoping to follow it up with a gold in Rio, but didn't quite manage it. So ended up with bronze. But in some ways, we look back and reflect and think actually the Rio campaign was actually a much better campaign than the London one. But the trouble with Rio was there were so many uncertainties. The water, for starters, you know, it was so much rubbish in the water. The venue incredibly tricky in terms of tide, and also the wind. We were racing inside the harbour, so we had Sugarloaf Mountain to contend with, and it was always, you know, it was always going to be an element of luck involved. And I actually led the whole week in Rio. Came down to the last race. I was leading by 1 point to Damien from France, and that last race unfortunately picked up a plastic bag on my rudder and had the most disastrous last race, which went from gold medal position to bronze medal position. So at the time I was rather devastated, but on reflection, just knowing the venue, and also, you know, seeing what had happened to some of my other competitors, it would have been so easy to have come away with nothing. So kind of now on reflection, that bronze medal is it's as special as my gold from London. Obviously my gold from London will always be right up there, because I don't, you know, how often do you get that opportunity to first of all compete at home games and then obviously win a gold medal as well. So yeah, the gold from London will always be that absolute high point. But on reflection, that, you know, I had to fight hard, probably harder. I had to fight harder for that bronze in Rio for sure. So Rebecca also asked me to talk about sort of the highs and lows that I've had along my sailing journey, so to speak. And there's been a lot. There's always a lot, you know. And I think, you know, it is a bit of a roller coaster. My husband can tell you that. He had over 20 years of being on this roller coaster with me. But I think the two that really stick out in my mind, and it's so funny because they were both in the same venue. It was the build up to the Beijing Games, and I think it was a year out, wasn't it, Luce? We got basically Lucy and Annie were sailing with Shirley Robertson, so they were campaigning in the England class with Shirley, and I got the call from Shells basically saying, can you step in for me and do the test event with Annie and Lucy? Because it was at the time, I can't remember whether she'd given birth to her twins or was about to give birth to her twins, but yeah, it wasn't a good time for Shirley to disappear off to Beijing for the test event. And for me, it was just the most amazing opportunity. It was my chance to step back into an Olympic class, which I kind of didn't think I'd ever get the opportunity to do. And two, you know, the opportunity to sail with two amazing sailors, you know, Annie and Lucy, absolutely brilliant team. And I think we did 1 day of training in Poole before we then went out to Beijing. And I think we had 3 days before the event started. So I'd never sailed in England before. The only keelboat I'd really sailed was the 2.4, and that's, you know, it's a 2.4 sort of, it is a keelboat, but it's so small, it's almost, you know, there's crossovers with kind of dinghy and keelboat. So to suddenly be sailing the Yingling with, you know, two other teammates, yeah, was an amazing experience. And we had the most amazing regatta. We ended up winning the silver medal there, which before we went, I don't think any of us dreamed was going to happen. And I look back and it's just one of the absolute highlights. Obviously winning gold in London and Rio are probably the top, but this definitely runs a close third, because it was just such an amazing regatta, an amazing experience to be able to sail with Annie and Lucy, and then obviously to do really well was fantastic. And I think, you know, I know I had a lot of support from my fellow 2.4 meter sailors, because I think because we did well at that regatta, it just kind of helped give a bit of respect and kudos back to Paralympic sailing as well. You know, I kind of jumped between the two, and I managed to perform, you know, on both circuits. So, you know, I remember, you know, the guys just being so proud and so pleased for me when I kind of finally jumped back into the 2.4. The other thing, which was really which again I thought was really important, was for the Paralympic side of things. There were no test events. We never had any test events. So I felt going into the Beijing Games, having this opportunity to actually race and do a regatta in the Paralympic Olympic waters was going to give me a really good advantage. And I think it did. But unfortunately, the actual games for me, the Paralympic Games, did not go according to plan at all. So this is my low, and it was a low. So going into, I'd say going into those games in Beijing, you know, I very much was tipped to get a medal. There was, in my mind, 4 of us that were going to be fighting it out. So obviously one of us was always going to lose. But it was a very interesting game, because out of the 4 of us that were tipped, it was only Damien that actually came away with a medal from those games. The results were quite topsy-turvy. And I can't speak for Thierry and Heiko, but from my point of view, I think I ended up finishing 7th or maybe 6th, but it was all a bit disastrous. And from my point of view, it was poor preparation. There was 2 mistakes. Well, there's one big mistake that I made, and that was just left development right to the last minute. So I waited until I got selected, and that was quite late. I think I got selected maybe in May, and the games were in September. So it gave us very little time to do the development that we wanted to do. I had a new boat. We tweaked a few things on it, and as ever, as most of you guys know, with boat builders, nothing ever happens on time. So everything was really late, to the extent that we'd missed a date to actually put the boat in the container and ship it out, that we were going to have to fly, whichever boat I chose to send, we were going to have to fly it out. We were that late. And I was faced with the decision: do I take the boat that I've been racing and is tried and tested? Do I send that boat, the old boat, or do I send the boat that we've just spent loads of money on? We've had all this work done to it. In theory, on paper, it should be the faster boat, but it hadn't at that point even touched the water. We didn't know. And I think I think it was the money side of things. You just think, God, I've just spent so much money. It's got to be faster, must be faster. So anyway, I sent the new boat, and cut a very long story short, it was slow. I think the work that we'd done to the boat, it basically changed all my settings. So we had to start again. And Annie came out with me as a tuning partner, and I had a really old boat out there that we'd been using kind of over the years for training and stuff. God, this boat was like 15 years old or something, and Annie was faster in that boat than I was in my brand new Glamour super fast machine. So that was that was a bit of a kick in the teeth, and I think, and it completely upset my program. So the idea of being the kind of week or so beforehand, I was going to just focus on starting and tide, and instead we just spent hours on the water just trying to get the boat up to speed. And it's interesting because I think we probably got it to a stage where it was good enough, but I think by that stage mentally I was kind of I was broken, and that was one of the other lessons that I took away from Beijing, was in terms of mental toughness. I definitely wasn't mentally strong enough, because it had such a massive effect. And actually, if I look back, to be really honest, I think kind of my mental toughness and my mindset was actually the whole cause of the problem, because if I'd backed myself at the beginning and done the development and just gone, no, I'm good enough, I will be selected, I'm good enough, and backed myself and had the confidence, I would have started the whole development process so much earlier, and it could have been a different story. So it's interesting, because when I look back, I think actually everything was to do with my mindset and just not being mentally tough enough. And it was really, after those games, it was really tough. And you have that, it's a hard place to be at Olympics or Paralympic Games. It's a really hard place to be if you don't win a medal, because it's very different to a World Championships, where if you come 5th or 6th at the Worlds, you go, yeah, that's actually a good result, I'll take that, you've got something to work on there. Whereas I think with the games, it's a 4-year cycle. It's such a long build up. It only comes every 4 years. You only have a limited number of games that you're going to be able to do. That it is the be all and end all, and nobody remembers who came 4th or 5th or 6th. It is only about the medals, and when you don't win one, it's tough. And Shirley did a talk actually at the dinghy show last weekend, and again was asked about, I think, Atlanta when she came 4th, and what was the thing that drove her to go on and do another campaign. And she said she knew what mistakes she'd made, and she knew she could do it better. And I think I was in exactly the same situation. I think if I'd come away from Beijing not knowing what I'd done wrong, or just actually I just got beaten by better people, I think I wonder whether my decision would have been different. Whereas I came away going, right, I know exactly what I did wrong, and I can do this better. And I do think that big low from Beijing was actually what won me the gold in London, that lesson. And I very much, for the London Games, very much worked hard on my mindset. Had a really good sports psychologist at the time, Ben Shell, and we just really worked hard on that. And again with London, just started development early before I got selected, just backed myself, and that was the difference. So I think that I often feel you actually learn a lot more from the lows, and when things don't go so well. They're valuable lessons, and I think they really are the springboard to success. And I can certainly say that was the case for me in Beijing. So so Rebecca said she was keen for me to talk about my experience of being a female and sailing, and what are my thoughts on it. And it's interesting, because I would say the reason I got a little picture there of me kind of coaching kids and stuff is I think at grassroots level all the way up to Olympics, Paralympics, it's absolutely equal. There's no issues, there are no problems. It's an even playing field. It's when you try and make the move into the bigger boats, into the yachts, into professional sailing, that I've certainly experienced the struggle, I think, is probably the simple way to put it. I mean, like the Paralympics, I mean, classic example, I was there racing against guys, and see me in Rio on the podium there with Matt and Damien, and it's just it's very equal up until there. It is when you make that switch into the bigger boats that I think, unfortunately, there is still a gap. And you look back to Tracy Edwards and Maiden, God, 1989, I think that was, and you think, God, that was so long ago, and have we moved on? And I think we have, but nowhere near as much as I think we probably would all like. I'm fortunate enough that I have got a position on an 80-foot swan, trimming the main, and believe it or not, all I have to do is press a button. So when I think that's the thing that I find confusing, is I understand obviously there's a strength issue between kind of obviously a guy is going to be stronger than a small girl like me, but when you get to the bigger baits, when you get to things like 80-foot swans, it's you're just pressing a button to drive the winch. So it does come down to just your your skills and how good for me on Umike, it's about how good am I at setting up a mainsail, how good am I at trimming, which I'm just as good as any bloke on that boat, and hopefully better, to be honest, which is why I've got the job. And you kind of look at the America's Cup, and again, I completely understand you're not going to have females as grinders because we're just not physically as strong. But why can't you have a female helm in the boat, or doing the flight control? And again, it was quite interesting because obviously everybody's aware that Shirley's been doing the commentary and everything out there, and I think she put on Facebook just some stuff about don't forget to watch the car, commentary's coming up and all that sort of stuff. And my old coach Ian Barker said, I think he put a comment like Shells, why aren't you helming, or something like that. And he wasn't taking the mickey or anything, he was being serious. And it is interesting that we haven't quite if you look at the number of females involved in the Cup, I think the majority of them are kind of in the office, but they're certainly not out on the water. And I think SCA did an amazing job with the Volvo Ocean race, and just trying to prove that as a team we can be as successful as the guys. And I think the Volvo Ocean race have embraced that, and I think what they're doing now with the race, encouraging teams to have females on board, I think is absolutely brilliant. And I think that's the way we're going to have to go. And I think just going back to the Olympics, I think again with what's going on there with introducing the mixed classes, I think is a really good idea. Like with the NACRA, the 470 switching over to being mixed, it completely makes sense, because I think if we can be racing together in the same boat, I think it'll help sort of override that I don't want to say prejudice, but I think if you grow up guys racing with females, when you move into like the more professional side of racing, the bigger boats, it will be the norm. So I think it's definitely getting better, and attitudes are changing. And obviously what the Magenta Project is doing is absolutely brilliant, and completely agree with Elaine of on that board we need to have guys on that board, and we need guys to be involved, because they're going to be the ones that will help us change it. So it's definitely getting better, but I think it's going to take a while, but we've just got to keep going and persevering. Finally, my last slide. So again, like Rebecca said, can I touch on a bit about, I think, juggling obviously studies and sailing. So I guess just kind of going back to the point I made right at the beginning when I said I didn't switch out of the 420 into the 470 until after I graduated from uni. And the reason for doing that was I decided if I tried to switch into the 470 at the age of 18, once I was too old for the youth squad, I was going to do like a half-hearted attempt at both. I wasn't going to properly focus on my degree, and I wasn't actually going to probably do a particularly good 470 campaign either. and I guess at that time there wasn't the funding from UK Sport either, so it was actually really important. You needed to get a job, a good job, to be able to fund your sailing, because at that moment in time there wasn't lottery funding or anything like that. So I actually prioritized my studies, and stayed in the full 20, carried on racing it. But I do remember kind of the final year of uni, I hardly did any sailing, and I just focused on my degree, because it's like, it's just one year of my life where, you know, sailing can just go on hold. I can go sailing for the rest of my life, but I kind of felt I only had one kind of shot at nailing my degree. So yeah, I don't think I did hardly any sailing that year. I even turned down a skiing holiday with my mum and dad, because it was kind of the couple of weeks before handing in my dissertation, and it's like, I can't afford not to keep going and keep working. So I even turned down a skiing holiday. So I think my advice would be prioritize. You know, I think first year of uni, it was, in terms of the work and stuff, it was quite easy, it's relaxed, so I did a lot more sailing. But as I went through those 3 years of my degree, I started to prioritize my degree over sailing and just put it on the back burner. I think one of the things that I learned from a really young age when I started doing the youth squad and stuff was time management. And I think that is really key. And, you know, it was a case that I'd be off to winter training, youth squad training and stuff at the weekends. So it was really, I had to make sure I'd done my homework during the week. And I think from quite a young age, I was kind of taught that discipline of, like, I'd come home from school, I'd just get crack on straight away with my homework, no TV, just get my homework done, because I knew I didn't have the weekend. I couldn't just go, oh, it's fine, I'll just leave it to the weekend. I couldn't, not if I wanted to go sailing. So I think from quite an early age, I kind of learned that time management. And so I think when I went to university, I already had that discipline, which I think was invaluable from just kind of, you know, what was happening at school. So I think in it, again, I'd say top tip is really think about, you know, how you manage your time. And, you know, if you want to go sailing at the weekend, just make sure you stay on top of, you know, your work during the week. You know, put the hours in during the week so that you can have that time off to go sailing at the weekends. And I think the last point I'm going to make, which is why there's a picture of me and Jono up here, is so Jono and I, we were on the sailing team together, and I think it was last year, or maybe it wouldn't have been last year because of COVID, 2 years ago. We've sort of loosely kept in touch, but a couple of years ago, Jono got in touch with me and said, hey, do you want to crew for me at the Firefly Nationals? And I did. It was brilliant. We came second, had a good old ding dong down to the last race, but unfortunately we cocked it up. But yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. So second at the Firefly Nationals, and it was really strange because I guess I hadn't seen Jono for years, but it was like yesterday, you know. And I think, you know, the friendships that you make now at uni, and especially kind of through sailing and stuff like that, they will be friendships for life, and you'll bump into each other along the way, and you'll probably end up sailing together as well. So I think, you know, uni's a brilliant time for making those relationships and stuff like that. And you know, and it's a brilliant time of your life, and enjoy it. And you definitely can fit both, you know, studies and sailing in, as long as you know, prioritize the right things and just manage your time well. And at that point, I will stop sharing my screen, and hopefully I've given you a few little tips.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Helena. Just hearing that journey of just the effort and the highs and lows and the things that have gone into your success, just amazing. I love the story about the preparation was the bit that let you down in Beijing, that running up to that, and that was what you learned from. And I think that's a good thing for all of us, isn't it? You know, just thinking about believing in yourself much earlier allows you to start preparing for whatever it is in life, whether it's a sailing event or whether it's an interview or a work opportunity. Believing in yourself and doing the preparation as if you're going to be winning, selected and winning, is just a huge lesson. So I think that's something that we can all take away from that. So thank you. Are there any questions then for Helena at this point?
Hello.
Hi, Liz.
I was just wondering, how was it going back to sailing after a big chunk at university? Sort of, was it quite hard feeling that some people had kept sailing all that time and kept campaigning and you were a little bit on the back foot, or was it just really lovely to be back into it?
No, I mean, what I did was that obviously I didn't make the switch to the 470. I hung on in the 420. So in the summer I was doing all the international regattas and stuff like that. And again, you know, if there were some open meetings going on in the winter, you know, I'd go and do those. So I very much, kind of the first and second year of uni, I was very much still sailing. Third year, as I said, you know, I kind of put it, I did during that year kind of put it on the back burner. But that summer, you know, after my exams, you know, I was off, you know, to the regattas and stuff. So I didn't feel like I sort of had a big chunk away from it. And it was interesting because obviously other sailors at the same time had decided to make that jump into the 470. But it's weird, I didn't feel like I was missing out. But I think also the difference is we didn't have the funding. So UK Sport, we didn't have the funding from UK Sport. So there wasn't the pressure from the RYA. And I have to say, I really feel for a lot of you guys at uni that are trying to do an Olympic campaign. Is I feel now because of the funding, there's a lot of pressure, you know, and you make the team, and then you kind of, you know, you've got to keep your place on that team because there's somebody else waiting in the wings to kind of knock you off. And I think it's almost a lot harder because I pretty much felt in control of, you know, my campaign and stuff like that. Just purely because, you know, it was a case of initially when I think the first year, I mean, I was dead lucky because funding, I started sailing 470s, I think in 97, and literally that year is when the lottery funding started up. So my timing was impeccable. And I was really lucky because up until then I had just been focusing on, right, you know, I want to do a 470 campaign. I'm going to have to fund it myself. Or try and get sponsorship, and then, you know, lucky enough I was in the right place at the right time. But I do see it, now I see it as being really difficult, because I think you're getting pulled in one direction by the RYA, and then on the other hand, you know, it's a case of you've got your studies, and I think, you know, I would say it is really important to look at the big picture. You know, that you can only do a certain, you know, if you can only do a certain number of, you know, Olympic cycles, and at some point you are going to retire from Olympic or Paralympic sailing, and what, you know, you need to have something to go to. You know, you need to think about a career that you need to think about a career after sailing. Or at least have a plan. But yeah, it's a tricky one, Lucia, because I do look back and I do feel like I was incredibly fortunate and I didn't have the pressures and stuff that I think you guys have now.
Fantastic, thanks Helena. We've got a question from Abby that's just come into the chat that says, what's next for you? What are your future goals within sailing now you've achieved Paralympic gold?
Yeah, so I retired after Rio. It was my plan anyway, but as some of you might know, sailing actually got dropped from the Paralympics. So in some ways it made the decision even easier, because well, I was planning to retire and now I have to. So my focus now is very much on coaching. So I've been doing quite a lot of coaching at youth level. So I'm involved with the RA regional training groups. I've got my own little jet squad, topper squad, based on the South Coast. And again, as Elaine said, I've been doing some coaching and stuff through the Magenta Project. And again, you know, just trying to get my foot in the door on kind of the professional yacht racing scene, which I've managed to do with Mcgregor, the 80-foot Swan. I'd love some more opportunities in that area, but it's tricky, it's difficult. But I'm kind of hoping, kind of through being at the regattas and stuff, you know, you make more contacts, and maybe it will grow. We'll have to see. But yeah, I would love to kind of get involved in more kind of professional yacht racing. That would be fantastic. And again, I'm really enjoying doing the mentoring stuff as well through the Magenta Project. So it's kind of, yeah, dabbling in different areas and
fantastic
a living.
Well, we're very lucky. We feel very lucky as a Magenta Project to have you helping for us as well, Helena. So thank you very much for your chat this morning, and for just all the input that you're now putting back into the sport. And I think that's amazing. I think
that's exactly, you've hit the nail on the head, Elaine. I think that's kind of how I've had an amazing career out of sailing, and I think I feel like I want to give back, and you know, whether that's through coaching or mentoring, that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that. I'm now going to hand over to Lucy Mcgregor, who's going to talk to you for the next part of this morning about her amazing career as a woman in sailing. Lucy has multiple women's world match racing championships to her name, and also competed in London in the newly created at that point Elliott 6 class. And so without further ado, Lucy, welcome.
Thanks, Elaine. First of all, of course, I'm devastated that Helena's, favourite moment was winning a gold medal and not sailing with me. I'm never going to forgive you for that one, Helena. But,
Lucy, it's so close. It's a fine line.
You keep telling me that, yeah. No, thanks for having me today. I think was the session due to finish at midday? Just a quick check on time, Lucy. I don't know. I can do a bit of a whistle.
No, session can finish whenever.
All right, cool. But by all means, first things first, shout at any point if anyone's got any questions, because keen to make sure you guys get what you want really from this. So I'll do a super quick whistle-stop tour of my sailing career. Really lucky to grow up in Poole. Parents both sailed and sort of on the water from day one, really, probably before I was born, if I'm honest. And certainly in my parents' arms on a boat. Really just messed around in boats as a kid, all different shapes and sizes, and loved it. Ended up starting to do a few more competitions away from Poole Yacht Club. So particularly in mirror dinghies at the time, and then moved into 420s and sort of came up through the various RAU squads, and but just loved it. Loved the competition. I'm fairly competitive, I think it's fair to say, and really enjoyed messing around in boats, but also sailing with loads of different people, and in loads of different types of boats. And I think that's something key for me, and for talking to anyone at any level. I think that's still super important, something I always try and stress, really. Got to the time to select whether to go to uni or not, and slightly different approach to Helena. I never grew up with the sort of aim of going to the Olympics, mainly because I just didn't really consider it. Not because I didn't want to, it just sort of felt really far away from me, and I was very much in the moment, just enjoying what I was doing, 1 year after the next. But ended up coming second at the 420 Worlds, sailing with my older sister, and that sort of opened the doors to the opportunities in the the 470 class in the Olympic development squad. So I decided, okay, I'll take a gap year, I'll sail full time, see if I'm any good at it, see if I enjoy it, and go from there. And pleased it did. I think it's fair to say I sailed the 470 for the majority of that year, and then Shirley Robertson and Annie Lush were doing a trial for their sort of final spot in the Yingling. So I just thought I'd go along, give it a go, and ended up getting the spot on that team, which was a huge step in my Olympic career. I think it's fair to say, because I think Helena would agree, you start off and you're very green, you don't really know how to put a campaign together. You know what you know from sailing your 420s and everything, and you guys at uni now with team racing or whatever you're doing, you know, you do build a campaign, and so you have that learning, and then it's just trying to understand how to step that up a notch really into the Olympic arena, I guess. And so, you know, super lucky to learn a huge amount from Shirley and Annie, I think it's fair to say. And that, you know, really was a big difference for me, because I went from aiming, this was sort of 2005-ish, and at that point I was aiming for 2012 games, because usually it takes you that long to even get to the games, let alone try and win a medal. And suddenly I was aiming at 2008 games, so that was quite a big step change really. Learned a lot, loved it. And I guess this is where I'll sort of do a quick switch into a bit of a focus on this chat really, in terms of personalities and different people of different shapes and sizes, and sort of how that's, you know, what I've learned from that through sailing, and how I think sailing is a pretty good sport for that. So first glimpse of that for me was the Yingling, and as I say, you got Shirley there, who already had 2 Olympic gold medals to her name. Annie, who you know, had sailed the Yingling a lot, so had a huge amount of knowledge in that sense. And then me, the nipper, really, who was, you know, probably a fairly naturally talented sailor, but didn't have a clue about half of the technical aspects of a Yingling and anything like that. Very much sailing by feel rather than necessarily knowing how to set up a rig and understanding the full mechanics of everything. So I think what was amazing, particularly that Shirley drove this, is in that campaign we all just worked to our strengths. You know, Shirley was the experienced campaigner, and you know, on the water she had really you know, very good skill set, obviously, in particular areas. Annie, I think, as Helena would back me up on, she's sails by numbers a lot. You know, for her it's all about set plays, what's the structure. She'll always have a million spreadsheets, and she'll record everything from every session, and she's incredible at that, because she will sort of approach it from that perspective. And I'm, as I say, probably a bit more of the like go by feel a bit more. I don't necessarily know why I'm doing something, but I just do it. Sometimes it's right, often it's not. And so we just played to our strengths, and that was both on the water and off the water. You know, Shirley was obviously a hell of a lot more experienced at bringing in sponsorship than I was, but actually there were other ways that I could support that campaign. So it taught me a lot, I think, that, and I really tried to take that into my next campaign, which was in the match racing, the Elliott 6 metre, which hopefully some of you guys have sailed down in Weymouth in your sort of I know there's match racing that happens in that, university match racing that happens in the Elliots at times. So moved into that. Unfortunately, we didn't make the 2008 Olympics. We went into the final race of the trials in first, and ended up third at that event. Sarah and Pippa won that event, and so we sort of switched in that last race. Similar sort of situation to Helena really at the 2016 games for her. So yeah, didn't make the cut that time around, but certainly focused the mind going forward somewhat. And probably at that point I didn't realize how much I wanted it until you know, again, it would be very similar to Helena really. For her 2008 experience, you know, you often don't realize how much you want these things until you can't have it. But yes, certainly focused the mind, and I started sailing the Elliott 6 metre with Annie, continued sailing with her and another girl at the time, and then eventually ended up sailing with Kate, my younger sister. So that was a pretty special team for us, really. You know, Annie's also from Poole, so the three of us were from the same area. One of them's my sister, one of them's been my friend and teammate for a long time, and it was pretty special campaign in that sense, and you're aiming for that Olympic medal on home waters, which not many people get that opportunity. So again, sort of using that lessons that we'd learned really from the Yingling, we really tried to build that into our match race campaign, and not necessarily consciously, a lot of it was subconsciously probably, but we had completely different skill sets, the three of us, you know, particularly on the water, as I say. Annie, and from a match racing point of view, really understood the sort of the structure of a match race, the set plays, the formulas that you can kind of build into a match race, particularly in the starting. Again, not dissimilar to your team racing, where you've all got a load of set plays, I'm sure, you know, that affects boats, and, you know, 1 and 3, you need to do this, this and this, and at different marks, you need to do different march tracks. Annie had that in her mind. She was like, you know, just her own computer going around constantly, and she brought that to the campaign. Yeah, really analytical. She could debrief for 10 hours easy after a day sailing. Kate, completely opposite end of the scale, probably more extreme than me in terms of sail by feel. She's really good at reading the breeze, would offer that, but, you know, had about half an hour of debrief in her probably after a day sailing. And I sat somewhere in the middle, so, you know, try to sort of bring those two together really, and that was my role, and kind of leading that team and helming and picking up the relevant information from them at different times and using that to the best of our ability to try and win. It's, you know, it's pretty simple at the end of the day. All you're trying to do is win a boat race, but I think one of the beauties of sailing is there's a lot of ways of doing it, and again, I think the three of us really showed that, because we have very different personalities in some ways, and Kate and I are probably a bit more similar. I'm sure a lot of you would mistake us from each other, but but essentially, yeah, you know, it really showed that campaign that there's a lot of ways of doing things, and I think that's a big lesson for all of us personally in sailing, that it's an incredible sport for that. You don't have to be of a particular skill set, you know. The Cup's a pretty incredible example of that right now, where you've got Giles Scott, who is really showing, unfortunately not anymore, but, you know, was really showing his skill set from a tactical point of view. And then you've got some incredible brains on that campaign that may not be on the boat racing, but they're bringing, you know, so much to that sport, so much to that team. And yeah, so what I'd say to everyone in that respect is, you know, don't think, oh, I'm not like that person that's got a gold medal over there, therefore I'm not going to be able to excel in this sport. It's such a broad, you know, there's so many different types of boat that suit different skill sets. Even within a team, you can have so many different skill sets, and I think that's really important to remember, and just understand yourself, you know, build on those strengths, make sure those weaknesses kind of build up a little bit in the background as well, but really make sure you work out what you want to do and apply yourself to that role. And then that campaign, you know, as I say, awesome. Building up to that home Olympics was incredible. We won the Worlds the year before, or 2010 actually, second in 2011. We've been number 1 in the world. We're in a good place, but didn't pull it off come the event. We ended up losing our quarterfinals by a few centimetres, but that's yacht racing, and still chokes me up slightly at times now. But but yeah, you know, incredible campaign. Loved it. Gutted, and if more than anything, I think for us it's a bit of a missed opportunity. We were really lucky. We didn't have many regrets from the campaign. But it did feel like a missed opportunity, because we knew we were good enough. We didn't pull it off on the day, and some other really good teams did. So fair play, yacht racing, you move on. So I seem to be good at picking classes that go out of the games next time round. So the Youngling went out of the games after 2008, went into match race, and that went out of the games after 2012. So then I moved into the NACRA class. And I don't know how many of you know what NACRA looks like. Hopefully a few of you. I might have a picture here. Yeah, great class, very different. I'd never sailed a cat before. Completely different type of sailing to what I was used to. Hopefully you can see that. But it's awesome. You know, good fun, suddenly cruising around, being at the bottom of Weymouth Bay and realizing it's only going to take you 10 minutes to get to the slipway rather than the hour it would take you in a Elliot was quite a nice change of scene. Yeah, you know, I think something I'm relatively good at is learning new skills quickly. Probably less good at the final end of the perfecting part, but so jumped into this NACRA 17 and it felt quite comfortable quite quickly, really. The big difference was you had to sail mixed, so you had to sail with a guy, and obviously the last couple of campaigns I've been sailing with all female teams. I didn't think anything of it, to be honest. I've grown up sailing in mixed teams. If there are two questions though that I've ever been asked the most by the press, it's probably what's it like sailing with your sister, and it's what's it like sailing with a guy. And both got fairly boring, I'm not going to lie, after a while. But I honestly stepped in the class, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, well, it's just another person. You just get on with it, don't you? And as I say, for me, it was all about the personality, not necessarily the gender. So yeah, I just shrugged my shoulders and got on with it, really. And again, I guess this showed, maybe not so much from the personality side, but from the sport being really good for different shapes and sizes of people. The NACRA was really interesting class to watch, as in the first couple of years particularly, because it was physical, really physical for a crew. For a helmet, it's pretty easy. You just hold a bit of carbon and kind of hold it between your finger and thumb and cruise around, really. But for a crew, it is full on. And so you'd think the sensible approach is probably have a female helming and a male crewing, given that the male is likely to be a bit stronger, bit bigger. So that's the approach we took, and and it worked for us. But equally, you had other boats where you had, so not Welsh here that you can see in this picture, but Dave Evans, who I also sailed with, he's what, probably 76 or so, 77 kilos, 78 kilos, built like a triangle. So his shoulders were huge, you know, he's a big guy, seriously fit. But he could go one race and his forearms would just be burning. Like he couldn't hold a rope by the end of the race because his forearms were just like frozen. And yet you had 60-kilo girls doing the same job and able to last the day. And so it really, it was really interesting in that respect, and showed that I think a lot of sailing is, yes, there's an element of strength is important, of course there is. And there's sometimes where you just can't get around that strength aspect. But a hell of a lot of it is technique as well. So, you know, you can, as I say, you've got 60-kilo girls that were out there doing the same as some 78-kilo guys, and often pulling the spinnaker up, like in this picture, quicker than the guys, you know. And I think if any of us would look at that before, we'd say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. No, surely I don't believe you. It's just that, you know, they're not trying or whatever. But no question, you saw some really, like, agility was quite a big part of this, and you know, the better you were moving around the boat, the better you were with your technique, the less you needed that strength to back you up, really, and needed to rely on it. So I think, again, yes, absolutely, there's some boats, you know, I'm never going to be able to go and grind on a AC 75. I think that's fairly clear. However, the sport's huge. The sport, it's pretty incredible in that respect. You can sail on your own in a laser, or you can sail with 20 other people on a 80-foot swan, and there's different roles within each of those boats that suits different skill sets and different shapes and sizes of people. So I'd say don't forget that, and again, just try and find those opportunities and make the most of them. I think something that bringing it back down to sort of a bit more the sailing that you or I might do on a weekend now. You know, if you went and sailed on a 30-foot boat and you're doing jib, you know, you can make life really easy or hard for yourself pulling that jib in on the new side and letting the other one off. As can other people make life really easy or hard for you doing that. And I think we've all been there, right, where the jib, you come out, the jib's really far out and you're grinding away and you're I can't do this anymore, this is really hard, and you feel like you need to be twice as strong as you are. But if you get your timing right, you only need to turn the winch a quarter of a turn and the jib's in. Yeah, and so it's just about actually understanding how you can use those techniques, how you can apply yourself, how you can use that agility, all that understanding of actually, if I let the jib off a fraction earlier, it means I can get it in on the new side. My weight's up on the new side earlier, and jobs are good, and we're going fast in the right direction. So yeah, I mean, this campaign was great. Unfortunately, didn't quite make it in terms of getting the spot for the games. We were close. We had a huge crash, unfortunately, in the last event of our trials just before it. So I spent the last 5 days of that trials boat building rather than training, which was far from ideal preparation. But awesome time. Sailing with guys, as I say, it was a big question for the press. They loved it. Now, at the time, I didn't think anything of it. However, I would say I did end up sailing with 3 different people throughout that campaign. So throughout the 4 years, 3 different people. All of them I got on with really well. I still do. They were all helms before, and so moved into that careering role. And was that harder because they were guys? Was it different? You know, did they sort of wish they were helming and think they could do a better job? I don't know. I don't know if that's whether it's a gender thing or whether that's just a case of actually effectively having 2 helms in a boat that are both trying to do the same role. Really hard to know, and I don't think I'll ever know. But I guess history for me tells me, yes, it was a bit different. It doesn't mean to say it was harder or wrong or that those guys weren't really good guys. But I did have a different experience for sure. And it's hard to put my finger on exactly what that was. But yeah, you know, still some awesome lessons from the campaign nonetheless. And sort of since then, I guess just going back to Helena's point about friendships for life and, you know, your uni friends and so on. As I said, I didn't go to uni then, but my group of friends that I came through 420s with all then went into the uni scene, sailed team racing against each other, and I was sort of, you know, although I was mostly in a different country at the time, I definitely stayed in touch with as many as I could. And then, and that's, you know, a lot about my sailing now. I've been able to go and do some match racing events. More recently, won the world's last 3 years. And a lot of that's just been with the friends that I grew up sailing on 420 with, and that then they all went to uni, not even the same uni, but different unis. And I feel pretty lucky to be able to do that. So I think there's a picture back here somewhere. Let's snip at some games. So here, for instance, this was actually a few years back now, but you got Annie and Sally there. So Annie that I sailed with for a number of years, and then Sally, who's an American that we sailed against a hell of a lot, and both Annie and Sally were a big part of setting up the Magenta Project. Celia, who again is Finnish, but sailed against her and built up a good relationship with her, and I've won the world with her now since this picture. And then Lauren and Ali, who you know, 2 of my best mates and still are, and you know, started sailing against Ali in 420s when we were 15 or something. So again, brilliant sport for that, because you can go and sail on a boat that's got, you know, that you need 2 people, go and sail with with 5 of your mates and go match racing on different boats of different shapes and sizes. And again, great example here where you use people's, you know, for me, the way I approach these sort of events is, right, who are the best sailors that I can get on board? Who are the people that I'm going to get on with and build the best team? And then we'll work out where to put them. You know, and you've got some people that might be 80 kilos on there and some people that might be 55 kilos and have a whole load of different skill sets. And it's just understanding really how to best apply those skill sets within the team. So yeah, I think that's probably my, how do I stop share? That one. Yeah, a few of my lessons there really. So different personalities and making sure you use them to the best of your ability, different shapes and sizes, but not letting that restrict you for what you want to do. And again, sort of building on Helena's points really in terms of the, you know, keep those friendships going, even if they're your competitors, because actually they might become your teammates in a couple of years' time. And there's a lot of people out there to learn from. So just, you know, absolutely do sail as many different boats with as many different people as you can, and you'll keep learning. But happy to have any questions if there are any.
Liz, I've got a question. So just picking up on the NACRA and the fact that, as you said, that you would have thought the obvious would be for the female to helm and the guy to be crewing. And you're right. I mean, I think, were you the only team? There was very few that did it that way round, were there? But it's interesting because do you think the way that world sailing is going and starting to mix the classes and get us sort of sailing together, do you think that could be a good step forward?
Yeah, I think it is. I think ultimately, in terms of who does what, it, you know, realistically, sailing is a big part, as all of you will know. There's a big part of it, the skill set and everything that you bring to the boat. That there is an aspect of, in a 470, for example, if you don't have a beanpole as a crew, you're not going to go as fast as as another team. Yeah, so sailing, you do, you know, depending on the boat, there are certain roles that require different shapes and sizes, and so on, a different weights. And you know, in the 470, the optimum weight is narrowed, hasn't it, for the current females and males that I think they start their worlds today actually. And I'm sure when it goes mixed, it will widen again as people try and understand that, you know, that optimum weight. And in that, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with a lot of females helming initially and a lot of males crewing because of the height aspect. But I think it's a good thing having that mixed disciplines. I think there's a lot to be said for it. I think you can bring, as I say, for me, it's really hard to put my finger on what was different. But I think at times there are differences, and it's not trying to shy away from that. It's trying to embrace it and make the most of it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucy. It's interesting, I think, hearing both of you talking about the 470 as it now becomes mixed again. I remember quite a number of years ago now being at an event with Cathy Foster, who of course was one of our very early Olympian women in that class, who when it went for, she was sailing as a mixed team, helming, and then of course it went to being all female and all male, and Cathy's view was very much of why. So really interesting that it's coming back round again, and hearing your view of sailing in a mixed team again.
I think a big part of that as well is we have to remember, I think all of us with this, is it depends what level you want to do this at as well. And if I take gymnastics as a different example, so ultimately, you know, in gymnastics there's an age limit where people start getting probably too old to be to go and win an Olympic gold medal, isn't there? And that's because of their shape and size and their, you know, what they can do physically, and so that sport has a band of a particular shape and size and age that you're likely to go and win a medal, and sailing's no different for a lot of classes, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just part of our sport. but there's a hell of a lot of other boats that we can all go and sail every weekend, and you know, not need to be of that ability. It doesn't mean to say people need to stop doing gymnastics. It's just that they might not go and win a gold medal doing it. They might just go to their local club of a Thursday and go and do some cartwheels or whatever you do in gymnastics.
We've got another question in the chat from Michelle, and I'll come to you first, Lucy, and then come to you, Helena, with the same question. Have you ever encountered yourself feeling imposter syndrome or not feeling confident about your sailing abilities? And if so, how did you overcome the feeling?
Being completely honest, I think in the NACRA there was a couple of moments where I really doubted myself, because I was sailing with someone that, you know, particularly one of the people I sailed with had a lot of experience sailing a tornado before as a helm, and so had spent you know, probably more hours than me helming a catamaran, and yeah, I had to question my ability at times as to whether I was doing the right thing or not. But ultimately I just try and focus on myself and my team, and you know, it's about getting better, isn't it? So trying to understand, if you think you're not doing something well, right, what is it that I can improve on? And at that point, if you can't find many things, then it probably means you're actually doing a pretty good job. Or if you identify those little elements, then great. If they're going to make you better, do them. Why wouldn't you? So for me, it's trying to turn that around and make the most of those sort of feelings rather than let them weigh you down.
Thank you. Helena, how about for you?
You know, I mean, it's a really good question. And I think, I mean, I think I've always had an underlying self-belief. I think I have always kind of believed in myself and that I can do it. But I've absolutely certainly had moments where my confidence has got knocked. And Lucy, you can probably back me up. You know, sometimes you'll have that regatta where it's just not happening. And it's weird because the harder you try, the worse it gets. It's almost, you get to that point. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wondered whether we almost saw it with Ben in the America's Cup. It was almost like with the start, he was almost trying so hard. It was just, he was making a hash of it in a way. And it's so unlike Ben to do that. You know, we see him as being so strong starting. And you know, to be really honest, I think absolutely Beijing, my confidence was knocked even before the first race, because I think, you know, I knew my preparation was poor, and at that moment in time, mentally, I wasn't certainly was nowhere near as tough as I was going into London. So, you know, I think mindset is so important, and I think 9 times out of 10, I think Lucy would back me up on this, when you get to that start line, in terms of ability, everyone's pretty damn equal. You know, it could be a running race, it could be a sailing race, you know, everybody is, in terms of technique, in terms of ability, there's nothing in it. And I think ultimately it's what's going on in your head that makes a difference about, you know, and I think it's almost that decides the medals, you know, and your mindset. And it's looking back, I mean, I worked incredibly hard, you know, in the build up to London to make sure that I was in the right mindset, and so focused. I was kind of like in this bubble. It was really strange. I was very much in this bubble, and it took a lot of hard work. You know, it wasn't something I could just always do. It took a lot of hard work, and you know, there are times when I look back, particularly London, I think, because that was the first time. It was easier for Rio because I kind of knew what I needed to do to get into that mindset, and so it was almost easier. But I look back at London sometimes and I think, how on earth did I do that? You know, and it's like I'm out of practice now. You know, I haven't got the mindset at all that I had, you know, in London. And, you know, sometimes I look back and go, how on earth, how did I deal with that? You know, how did I deal with the pressure? How did I do that? And, you know, and I think it is about just working on that. And, you know, and confidence, you know, confidence is, you know, it is all to do with your mindset and just being really strong and having that self-belief. And if you can work on that, you know, I think that it's almost the answer to everything, to be really honest, and just working on that positive mindset and that self-belief. And you know, and it's weird because some people say that confidence is a behavior, and actually if you behave confidently, even though you might not actually feel it inside, it, because outwardly you're behaving in a confident manner, it sort of, your mind starts to switch into that mode. But yeah, I mean, I think it is about kind of, as Lucy said, you know, if your confidence does get, it's about being aware and realizing when you're not feeling confident and your confidence has been knocked, and then almost just asking yourself, you know, the question of, okay, what's happened, what can I do about it, you know, do I want to feel like this? No. Okay, I can do something about it, and making that change. So I think it, you know, a lot of it is being aware of, okay, I'm not feeling very confident, why am I not, and actually making that change. But I think for me, it all definitely comes down to kind of mindset and just working on it, and just, you know, trying to, you know, and no one's going to be confident all the time, you know, it's impossible, but you know, it's something you just got to work at.
I think you're absolutely right, Helena, and I'll ping over a link to Lucy, Abby, I'll ping over a link after this. I was interviewed a few months ago by Yachts and Yachting about the issue of confidence in women in sailing, and they did an article on exactly that question. So I'll see if I can find it and ping it over, because of course for women it's an issue that affects us in many areas of our lives, whether that's whether that's our sporting lives or whether it's working, and is often an issue for women in leadership. So I think a very relevant question. We've got a question.
Just quickly, I've just kind of just remembering something. I had so again, just working with Ben Scheller, sports psychologist. I just had a hit word, which it was actually Ben's. I remember him saying to me DYB, and I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, do your best. And he's like, that is all you can do. And for me, if I'm feeling nervous, or if I feel like I'm lacking confidence, that is my hit. I just say, you know, all I can do is my best, and that's all I can expect of myself, and that's all anyone can expect of me. And it's really strange, because whenever I say it to myself, I just feel like this weight is lifted off my shoulders, because it's like, you know, I'm going into an interview, all I can do is do my best. I've done, you know, I've prepared myself as best I can, and just, you know, it's a case of be me, and, you know, DYB. And for me, that is a massive hit, and that is something that I, you know, still use today. And I find it really calms me down, and, you know, I do feel like I've released the pressure. That I think a lot of time it's ourselves putting us under pressure. We perceive it as other people, but it's not. It's actually comes down to it's you putting pressure on yourself. And if you can find a way, or a hit word, I mean, that's my hit word, to release that pressure. I think that's kind of the key.
Fantastic. Well, that's just pop that in the chat, will you, Helena, so that everybody can pick up on that, because I think that's really useful tip. We've got a question now from Karen, and she apologises, it's a very long question. So Lucy, I might come to you first with this while Helena's just writing in the chat. So just concentrate for a second on the question, because it's long. Karen's asked, do you think we're moving towards mixed gender sailing being the norm across disciplines and countries? And do you think that this might mean standards and pathways may vary lower down from the Olympic classes? And what do you think could be done at this level? And she says that as background, they still see huge disparities on the university sailing pathway, for example, and putting in gender ratios doesn't always go down very well.
Right. I think the sport, as I alluded to, I think we've got a really diverse sport, and so to generalise it, I think is hard. Is mixed gender sailing becoming the norm? Probably not as much as we'd all like to, but I'm not sure if that's just a sailing issue or if that's a general you know, society issue, as I say. You know, we struggle at times to keep females, for instance, in sailing at, you know, in their late teens, but that's not just sailing, that's other sports as well. So I think we need to be careful not to think that we're doing a really poor job as a sport in that respect. Is becoming norm, and yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of pressure, isn't there, on a lot of organisations and events now to try and make sure we've got more equality and in a really inclusive sport, and I think that's a good thing. Again, that's a wider piece than just sailing as well, really, and wider piece than just the Olympic Games. But I think the more that happens, the more it will filter down into junior classes, into university sailing, into club racing and everything. So I think that's all really positive, and we just need to keep chipping away. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, and we need to be quite realistic about that, I feel. But it doesn't mean to say we can't all do our bit. And if that's at this sort of university level, for example, I think that's a case of, right, well, what can we all do on this call to make sure that your friend comes along and continues doing the university, your female friend comes along and continues doing the university sailing, and that you're just as good, if not better, as the guys around you. And that's where we on the, you know, that's our easiest way of making a difference, I think, is supporting each other. I don't know if that's answered the question, but
I think it's good. And I think certainly from a Magenta point of view, what we've seen increasingly, and it seems to have increased quite rapidly over the last 12 months, which I think is partly due to the amount of reflection time that people have had, and enforced reflection through the whole COVID thing, that there are far more of the bigger sailing kind of races and events coming to the party, as it were, around diversity and inclusivity. So to the point where SailGP declared, I don't know whether it was back end of last year or early this year, that they're now putting a strategy in place. As the Magenta Project, we're working with them to think about what that looks like. The ocean race are also coming to the party, as we know that they had quotas on board in the last, certainly the last event. I'm not sure whether it was the one before that as well, but certainly the last event there were quotas on board, and they got better ratings if they'd got women on board as well. And now they're looking at how that plays out in a much bigger way as well, and how that becomes properly inclusive, rather than, you know, as it was, you know, skipper named bloke, tactician named bloke, navigator named bloke, woman 1, woman 2 being the bottom end of that of the crew lists. So so looking at how all of that changes. So I think it is definitely changing, not just in an Olympic pathway. And I think Helena said earlier that that in Olympic pathways and through the grassroots right the way up to Olympics, there isn't really a problem. And I would echo that. I think that the problem there is not that it doesn't exist, but that there are very clear ways of identifying when it does exist or when it does become a problem. There are pathways to deal with that. There are support mechanisms within those pathways to challenge anything that doesn't feel fair, which don't yet exist in the performance pathways, don't yet exist in a lot of the coaching pathways, interestingly, that we still don't have parity in coaching, even at Olympic level. And I know, because I've seen all the development surveys and the reports that have come out of the BUSA development around the gender issues there, in particularly the difference around helms and crews, that there's still very much an issue within student sailing. And I think that certainly part of that is around making sure that your women friends come along and get involved and stick in there. I think also, and talking in various of the student sailing groups over the last few years, that the women-only events have a place in the same way that I was referring earlier to the foiling clinics being developed for women, because there's still, in many cases, there's still a skill gap in the number of women who are performing at a level. There isn't as big a pool always of skilled women to choose from, and so it becomes easier to choose a male helm, because actually there aren't enough women that already have the helming experience. And for some women, just creating women-only events and women-only training can be the catalyst, if you like, to give them the confidence to try a different place in the boat, a different position in the boat. Certainly we've had that success, and Helena has coached a lot of the Magenta training days where we've had that level of success of being able to move women into different roles in the boat where there have been no men that you're competing with. And by upskilling women like that, then suddenly there becomes a much bigger pool to choose from, which also is very helpful. And it will change. I think that you know, that there's a whole the world around us has changed so much and is changing very significantly, and I think that will, as much as anything that we do, that in conjunction with the things that we put in place, will definitely move this whole piece forward quite quickly now. I think I think we'll see a lot more change in the next 5 years than I have, for example, beating my head against this particular brick wall in the last 30 years. So Helena, you've put some things into the chat. Karen, thank you. I think you're right that more role models, more women helming higher up in mixed classes, it will start to change, but it will take time. I think the time element is accelerating, significantly accelerating now. From where it has been, which is the same, I think, with many changes. It takes a very, very long time to initiate change. But once people start to cotton on, they go, oh, let's get on with it. Fantastic. And that's definitely.
I think in sailing, you know, we have to remember it's only very recently that the 49er, for instance, has been a women's class. And things like that. Now we're going to start seeing some youth come through, go straight into the 49er FX, you know, straight into foiling boats, and they will be our role models of the future. And I think we have to be realistic that we can't change, you know, we can't catch up 20 years experience overnight. And so yeah, let's really try and, you know, support the people around us, and all you girls on this call who are, you know, your learning curve is far steeper than all of us now, because you can take it in and I forget it all. And yeah, you know, build up on that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Huge thank you to both Helena and to you, Lucy, for taking time out of your weekend to be part of this call. Lucy and Abby, I'm going to hand back over to you now, but thank you very much for having all three of us today.
I'll just echo that. A huge thank you to Helena and Lucy, and to you, Elaine, for making yourself available and facilitating some really, really interesting and important discussions, I think. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone for coming, and hopefully see you later at some point today for our further events. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.